Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How we doing? So we're one day into free agency, into the tampering window. We're going to talk about not just the Commanders. We're going to talk about other players. There were a lot of players on the list. We had a lot of reports about a lot of big splashes, so we'll just get right into that as far as the splashes go and things like that. Pretty normal day that I've come to expect from the Commanders. This is kind of how they've done things here, man. But they did make a splash. Not only with this signing, but Adofe Owae for 4 years, $100 million, $68 million guaranteed. So basically, you're almost locking up 3 years of guaranteed money. Pretty good contract for a guy that realistically, he has everything in the toolbox that most pass rushers don't have. That's something that Adam Peters is very much stressed. He wants the guys that you want to get off the bus first. That's been very evident, not just with this signing, but our first deal in free agency was locking up Laremy Tunsil to a 2-year extension, 2 years for 60 first, $30 million offensive lineman. So two big splashes, really, after going through the offseason last year with the Terry McLaurin, kind of thing. It's nice to see the Adam Peters and this group. They prioritized getting their Laremy Tunsil deal done. They got that done. That was the first order of business as far as once free agency hit. He wasn't a free agent. He had another year left on his deal. This deal will take him through 2028. Like I said, first offensive lineman to average $30 million a season. In AAV, all that money was guaranteed. So a lot of people were talking about a way for them to drop their cap hit, with Laremy Tunsil. I don't know how you do that when you guarantee all the money that's going into the extension. Though I will say, if he had a year left on his deal that wasn't guaranteed, I'm sure there's some of that money's moved around. Realistically, probably in another year, after next season, you're probably talking about another negotiation period after the 2027 season. At that point, he'll be 33. Basically, we're in the Trent Williams type situation with Laremy Tunsil. And then, you look at Adofe Owae, again, another huge, very, very traded up guy. He ran a 4.39 at the combine at 6'5", 250 some pounds, basically almost 260. This is a premier level athlete. My buddy asked me, because he is a Chargers fan. He's like, "What do you think about the Owae signing?" For me, what it was if you get 75% out of this guy's toolbox as far as production and skill set on the field and production, you've won this signing. The guy is built and capable and has the pass rush technique, power, the length and everything to do swims and certain things like that, spin moves, and just he has every skill set to be a 12 to 15 sack a year guy. It's never happened. Honestly, realistically, 12 to 15 sacks are about half of his career in two different intervals. The season and a half of production that he had from 2024 with the Ravens, he had 10 sacks, and then 7.5 sacks last season with the Chargers at the second half of the year after the trade deadline. You take that season and a half away from him, his other half is, about 15 sacks. He has 30 sacks in total. For his career, realistically, he coming out of Penn State guys have taken a little bit longer to translate outside of Micah Parsons. We saw that with Abdul Carter. This is the age group that you want to be in. He's 27 until December. So, you have him pretty much locked up for your his whole 27 season, his 28 season, his 29 season. This is this is a boom or bust signing. Realistically, he's going to have to be an every down rusher for us. He's come off the bench. He came off the bench for the Chargers and did a very, very good job. The speed is evident. All the explosive traits, they're evident when you see him on tape. It's not like the guy doesn't show up. He just, we've talked about it, sacks being relative as far as, are you creating consistent pressure? He does do that. Are you getting the quarterback off his mark? He does do that. It's going to be scheme. It's scheme specific. We talk about this all the time as far as players in the draft. Scheme, it's very, very pivotal. We're going to be an attacking team. I think he fits actually, for as big as he is, he looks like a 4-3 defensive end, but honestly, he's his athletic traits and the way he moves and his skill set says he should be an off-ball, 3-4 outside linebacker. That's the best look, I think, for him, standing up and rushing the edge. I like the signing. We knew that I was all in on the Linderbaum market. That's insane where that went. I'm very okay with us not getting into that. We kind of went all in on Alec Pierce. He just decided to return to Indy, or at least that's what's being reported is we were all in. But, we've done this every offseason since Adam Peters has been here. Top guys, we're in on them. We don't get them. You can't make guys put pen to paper, and that's been a consistent narrative for them. And, I know just as a Commanders fan, man, we have sat back and watched for so many years. Ron Rivera never did anything, and now you're dealing with year 3 of Adam Peters, which year 1 he was very active, but a lot of them guys were older. The narrative coming in, this is why I tell everybody, I'm like, don't ride the waves. You get all these media reports, and I specifically spoke on it yesterday. It's none of these reports are coming out of the building. I mean, clearly they were going to make a splash. They made a splash. So it's not like those things were wrong. But when you have a team that has $90 million in cap space, but you have 30 open positions on the roster, you're going to make some signings. When you have the pass rushing, totals, and you're making it all schematically how your guys are getting sacks. When you have Dorrance Armstrong, you don't have a premier level guy at the edge rusher position. I think this speaks more to the draft, take that Adam Peters is getting from everything at the combine. I don't think that Adam Peters believes that Arvell Reese and David Bailey and Ruben Bain Jr. will be there, much less if they even like the measurable type of a Ruben Bain Jr. when you see an Adofe Owae. I mean, that's what Adam Peters looks for, man. And when you go back over the history of, whether it's the Denver Broncos when he was there, the Patriots, especially the 49ers, when you look at the 49ers on field, man, they look like a team that every one of them guys on it, just about every position, look like the first guy that could get off the bus. I mean, they're physically yoked up. They're big guys. They're physical. They're fast. Adofe Owae fits this measurable. I think this is one of them situations where you put a ton of money into the position. You put some youth, you put, a versatile piece at the position, but we're probably not picking edge rusher till the 3rd round, depending on what we do with our first pick, or any kind of movement we do in the draft. Maybe they move up from the 3rd round pick, end up acquiring less picks over the course of the draft, but they have to move up from the 3rd round pick just to get the guys that they want, or the guy that they want in the 2nd or 3rd round, because maybe one of the top 3 edge rushers that they value are not really there, and any of the other rushers after that aren't maybe so worthy of the pick as far as pick number 7 goes. Like I said, so I mean, I was fielding a lot of texts yesterday. Guys, I just don't understand. And I was like, man, this is why you can't read the reports, man. They said we're going to be active. This was before the Owae signing. Everybody was like, I just don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand. Adam Peters needs to, elevate the top end talent of this team, and I believe he's going to do so. Honestly, it was funny. I was watching NFL Network yesterday, and right before we signed Marcus Mariota, when they announced it, it was the Commanders came up and they were like, Marcus Mariota. I was like, man, they do this every year. Every year they re-sign guys. They get those mid-tiers, the Amik Robertson edition. Adam Peters is very much tried and true to his beliefs in how to build a team. He is not just going to overspend. He has a figure for every player. The Jalen Phillips, $80 million guaranteed on a $120 million pact. That's crazy money for a guy that's had the injury history, but good for the Panthers, man. They're a team that's coming off the playoffs. They need to elevate their overall roster talent, and they're doing that. We had mentioned the linebackers here. The Raiders are all in. I mean, they're spending money. They got to hit the floor of the cap. They're drafting a top overall pick at quarterback, man. They're accruing assets. They're getting rid of Max Crosby. I mean, honestly, the way that the Raiders are doing it is as a bad team, sometimes you do have to overspend. Going $27 million a year for an offensive center when the next highest center is paid $18 million a year, Creed Humphrey. It doesn't really matter how good Linderbaum is. He's like for the way that the cap has always fallen, the allocations of assets, center has never gotten that type of contract. So when I look at it, and yes, we paid Tunsil. He's going to be the first offensive lineman to average $30 million a year over the course of this deal. But when you pay $30 million for a premier level offensive tackle, and then you have an offensive center that's getting paid just $3 million AAV underneath of that's a hell of a blow up in that market. Kind of glad we stayed out of it, as much as I wanted Linderbaum, as much as he was a fit. Similar deal with Alec Pierce, man. It's a guy that has 1,000 yard season. He was ascending each season. I felt like he would have been a perfect schematical fit for this team. Were we willing to pay him more money than the Colts? I don't know. They reported that some team was willing to pay him more money, but we were apparently at the time reported to be the only other team interested in him. So paying him more than $29 million a season AAV, and then getting $60 million guarantee, which is the top 5 in guaranteed money for a wide receiver. I think it's it's the free agency market, man. When you're gonna spend, you're gonna overpay a little bit, and that's what it is when these guys get to the free agency market. That's why re-signing your guys early. It's there's GMs that they do business a certain way. It's to stay away from the free agency market. Having a little bit of foresight and wherewithal to know that, hey, if I lock this guy up earlier, it's just it's less money down the line. Ultimately, all these guys make a lot of money, and that's what it is. Adofe Owae, welcome to the Washington Commanders. I'm really, really happy to have you. I really hope that this guy can ascend to his ceiling. This is going to be coach speak for it, man. Like Durante Jones, first time defensive coordinator, first time calling plays. The staff that he's acquiring, I do like that we brought in the old defensive line coach from the Rams, that was there with Aaron Donald and guys like that, Jared Verse and things like that. Because we need to maximize this unit. Then we went to another signing very, very shortly after the Adofe Owae. This is a familiar signing for this team. This is a player I never really wanted to even let go back in the day, man. He had a really, really good season with Houston, which was Tim Settle. And he was a good player with the Bills. Honestly, he was the Bills' best run stuffer when he was there. And the Bills have always had issues run stopping because of the way that they've built their defense with smaller, faster pieces to get after the quarterback. But Tim Settle was always a guy that I liked. He was drafted by the Commanders here in the 5th round. 5th or 7th, I can't really remember. I feel like it was the 7th, but I've seen the reports of 5th. Don't hold me to it. That was 2018. I do know that. But out of Virginia Tech, man, he was a big, kind of physical run stopper, man. Gave us a little bit from the pass rushing department, but he's a big, huge body. He's hard to move. He fits a 3-4 scheme, which we ran back when he was here. And, he's played the 4-3 scheme as well, and a lot of guys have, especially Daron Payne from that era. Both of them two have played together in the 4-3 and the 3-4. We played a base, 4-3, but we ran a lot of 3-4 nickel and things like that. And then we ran a lot of 3-4, base package and then 4-3 nickel and 5-2, 5-2-5. So, Tim Settle's a guy that I'm really, really excited to have back. It was a good deal for a defensive tackle. I think it was 3 for $25, good term. He's sniffing on 30 years old, but I think there's definitely some miles left to be had on that motor. He's got some tread left on them tires. Defensive tackles are really, really good until about 33, 34. They're almost like the offensive line position. They can play a little bit elevated age. Maybe they don't have the same impact, but they're still productive in roles and things like that. Tim Settle's a really, really good role player. It's another thing that we needed to do was shore up the middle of this field. Stop getting gashed in the run game. You want to be a team that can be able to control clock and run the ball. Well, got to also be a team that can stop the run and get off the field. Get the ball back to your offense and things like that. Turnovers or something specific. I know Amik Robertson. I'm a big defensive back guy, and I know what he did against Justin Jefferson. I saw him one-on-one. A lot of Justin Jefferson routes in the slot. I know he had that game, but realistically. That's an outlier game for me for Amik Robertson. He's a solid player, a solid nickel. I think this allows Mikey Samuelsville to stay outside, which is where he has been best utilized, to date. We're going to see, man. We're really going to see what the Amik Robertson signing does. It's again, over in the Brian Flores defense, they get away with lesser players on the back end who are very versatile players on the back end, but don't necessarily have that, like, I man you up and lock you down, but like I play zone, I play off, I keep my eyes on the ball. We make a lot of turnover type plays. Maybe this defense really does accentuate Amik Robertson's skill set. As far as for me, just because he had the game of his life against Justin Jefferson, that's one game. You got to have a consistent impact on this team, and the nickel position is really, really hard to play. I'm not shading him for anything, but it's just there are other players that I feel like are worthy of deals. But Adam Peters is, like I said, he's very, very much set on his type of what he is willing to pay. He's not going to go into a market that he's not comfortable with. He's not going to go spend a lot of money just for the sake of spending money. It's just who he is as a GM, and I mean that's where he came from. Was he comes from the Patriots. This is a guy that I think fits. I think for the narrative of what we're doing. I thought linebacker would have been a position that we would have locked up. I think Quay Walker was a fit for $15 million a year. Obviously, he just chose the Raiders. It is what it is. It's a first-year staff. Maybe there's a little bit of hesitancy because we're starting first-year coordinators, year 3 of the build, after a down year. Sometimes you just don't have that highlight, I still think a lot of players would like to come and play with Jaden Daniels. Ultimately, that's what it is. Where's the coaching staff in that? I don't know. But this is a player that I really hope we focus on day 2 of this free agency is Jaquan Brisker. He's a guy that I've mentioned before. He is a guy that can cover tight ends. He is a guy that can make plays in the passing game, and then he is a tone setter against the run. Jaquan Brisker is the type of attitude player. Is he the height, weight, speed guy that, Dan Quinn and, AP have typically had at their strong safety position? No. But, if we're talking about it from that aspect, I know Caleb Downs has mentioned a lot here, and I would love Caleb Downs here, but he doesn't fit the mold of what this coaching staff has generally looked for in a big body, strong safety, physical enforcer type. But Jaquan Brisker and Caleb Downs, they both are very, they're both very physical players. They're both very smart players. They fit the bill of a premier, strong safety, and I think, it's a player that I just think fits the skill set, maybe doesn't fit the physical build or the physical appearance of what this staff has always kind of seemed to look for, but this is a really, really good player. It's a player that I hope we're kind of in the mix on. There's a lot of things that are going to come in free agency. I'm not going to put up clips of Brandon Ayuk. It's pretty much a done deal until it's not for us, for me, as far as whenever the San Francisco cut him. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a signing here. I don't even think it's going to take much time. Almost in the manner of Tremaine Edmonds getting dropped by the Bears and then signing with the Giants. That was something that was pretty much reported as it was happening. The Giants were willing even almost to trade for him, and then he got hit on the market, and then there was a deal for Tremaine Edmonds. And to me, that speaks volumes. The Giants are very much in the running back market. They're very much in the the linebacker market. They need a lot of help on their team. Very similar markets to what the Commanders are in, and I think it's very telling. It's almost like when the Chiefs come out and they sign Kenneth Walker first hour or two of free agency, and then very much similar Travis Etienne going to the Saints. Both of those teams are right behind us in the draft, and the first thing I thought of, I was like, man, I think they really, really know that the floor for Jeremiah Love is pick number 7. With the way that Adam Peters drafts and his strategy and everything that they like to do. Again, very, very telling to me with the combine that Sonny Styles had, with the tape that Sonny Styles had, with the blue chip grade that Sonny Styles has, that the Giants went out and signed Tremaine Edmonds, a big physical athletic linebacker, almost meets those type of, he was kind of like the Sonny Styles before Sonny Styles, minus the production and game tape. There was a lot more development that you needed to see from Tremaine Edmonds. It took him a little bit of time when he was with the Bills to get it going. Then he went to the Chicago Bears and then locked it all together. And he's still a very young player. He was very young when he came out. And there were a lot of young developmental traits that he needed to develop around his actual physical skill set, which we all saw when he was at Virginia Tech. Very similar with Sonny Styles, minus the production. Sonny Styles' production is right everywhere that you need it to be for a linebacker. I think there's some doubt to in the New York Giants, building that Sonny Styles is even going to be available to them at pick number 5. He's one of the premier players in this class. I think Tremaine Edmonds was a insurance policy, and I think it was a way for them to shore themselves up to not have to be married to the Sonny Styles market, or maybe they know that they're going to go Jeremiah Love because they haven't signed a running back. They got their linebacker, and maybe that means Sonny Styles is going to be available to the Commanders. There's a lot of things, but we're going to have a lot of pods about that for the fallout in free agency, and we'll get to those things. So day one, Adofe, Owae, Tim Settle, Amik Robertson. You re-signed Marcus Mariota to be your backup quarterback. He fits the locker room culture. He's just a really, really good guy. Him and Jaden Daniels get along. They push each other. It's actually a really, really cool relationship. And just vibe that you see from these two. I think they're both mentally the type of guys that you want from the quarterback position as far as leadership, whether one was the veteran and one was the rookie, or one was the young guy and one was the vet. You could interchange both of them. The way that I see them support each other on the field, it's nice to have Marcus Mariota back. But again, this is a 5-12 football team. I don't want all those big splashes for the Commanders to be re-signing 5-12 football players when after your 12-5 football season, they re-sign less players. They re-sign less players off their 12-5 roster, letting Jeremy Chin go and a lot of guys, Zacchaeus and certain pieces, De'Ami Brown. They let a lot of pieces go off that 12-5 roster, and they wanted to elevate and they wanted to get better. So there was a lot of turnover from that roster. And, the thing that I'm seeing right now, and I mean, it's day one. We're going to get into day two today. I'll be reporting on that probably tonight or tomorrow. But, I just think when you're a 12-5 football team and you let the roster turn over as much as it did and you let a lot of players that fit go without pieces being in there, it's almost the same thing that they do with Tyler Biadasz. They paid him the respect to let him go re-sign, but you didn't have another answer on the team. Yes, you can talk about Nick Allegretti wants to play center and things like that, but realistically, man, like Nick Allegretti is not as good as Tyler Biadasz, not a guard and not a center. That's why I was so, enamored with the Tyler Linderbaum market. There are really good centers in this draft. That is one thing I will say about this draft. But now you're going into the draft with need. Granted, the range of the draft where you start picking needs is where these offensive centers are going to be. But again, man, I mean, you got to come out of this draft. And I mean, the good thing about the Commander's position in this draft is you are going to be staring one of the two names at the least of a Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Love, David Bailey, Reuben Bain Jr., Arvell Reese, Cardinal Tate. Out of those names, you're going to be staring at least two of them in the face. So, I mean, it's just mathematical odds. So again, you could get the wide receiver position handled with a young up-and-coming player in Cardinal Tate. That is an option. Sonny Styles, I think that would be a home run, selection. You saw how hard it was for me when I did my mock just to let him go and not be the pick. And then, again, Jeremiah Love, I think he's very much in play because of Adam Peters' draft strategy. I think he did have Josh Connerly graded as high as he did to make that selection and not want to trade off of it. Offensive linemen with those athletic markers don't fall to pick 29. I said it before the draft. I thought he was the 15th best player in the draft. And honestly, his ceiling is much higher than that. It just is that I felt that another year in college and he would have been the top 5 pick in this draft. So again, there's a lot of things. I know a lot of guys were, reporting splash here, splash there, splash here, splash there. We're in on every free agent, but that's just not how free agency goes unless you're the Raiders or unless you're the Browns or unless you're the Jaguars. Over the course of history, we've seen it year after year after year after year, these teams that go all in free agency. In 2 years, a lot of these players are leaving and re-signing, going back to their teams that they came from or going to another team where they fit because they're trying to maximize the rest of their career. They're trying to win because they took the money before. Now they're trying to get back to winning. We'll see how it goes with the Raiders. I do like Clint Kubiak. I love the quarterback that they're about to draft. I love the players that they signed. I mean, Quay Walker was one of my guys. I mean, Linderbaum on here was one of my guys. I mean, I'm not saying they're not signing dudes. They are. So, I mean, it's good for them. It's good to see them, start to take competing and getting into a real, rebuild and taking it seriously, getting the assets that they got from Max Crosby. You hate to lose that player, but you're starting to get younger. You're starting to sign players that are going to hopefully be there when Fernando Mendoza takes off and develops and everything clicks for him. But you're also giving him the pieces to be able to have early success. So again, you're protecting him. You get the center. I've talked about it a million times on here, how valuable a veteran, really good center is to having a young quarterback. You take that off of the quarterback. Now the offensive center makes the calls and the protection fronts. And again, it's just I like what the Raiders are doing. Carolina Panthers went out there. Phillips, Devin Lloyd, really, really good players. Two guys that, again, were on my list. They went to the playoffs last year. They're trying to get back. They're trying to take a step in their division. Give Bryce Young more help and things like that. That's why I think they're going to probably be drafting in the wide receiver market again, with all the success that they had with Tedero and McMillan. Again, hats off to them. I would have liked to see the Commanders have another addition or two by now. But, I think that's all Commanders fans. And honestly, I think that's every fan and for every team in free agency. You always want to see your team improve. When you're the Commanders and you have a lot of holes, you coming off a 5-12 roster and you're trying to maximize Jaden Daniels' rookie window, a lot of moves are going to be made. So, day 2, embrace the craziness, embrace the chaos. Hopefully, there's not a big wave to ride today. Hopefully they make the signings that they need to make. Ultimately, I just pray for this team to make the best moves for this team, for not just now, but for the long term. I just want to see this team be a winner. They have the type of quarterback that you can win with, and you should be winning with. I hope Adam Peters is just, I hope he goes out here. I hope he has a calculated plan. I hope he executes that plan. I hope he gets pen to paper for all the guys that he wants, man. I want to see this team have a collective, talent level a lot higher than what I've seen for these first 2 years, and honestly for the last 7 years under Rivera and things like that. We just need better players. Chige Okonkwo, the old Maryland tight end, I think that's a guy that could fit. We could talk about the Titans offensive center. I think his best football is ahead of him. That's probably about the only other veteran center I think I would even go after at this point. Connor McGovern has been locked up by the Chiefs. You could take a look at the Green Bay center that they just dropped, but he's coming off a broken leg and a fibula injury. That's going to be a medical kind of issue, and how long is he even going to be available going into this season? I'm sure that's going to be some carryover as far as injuries go there. Offensive center was a position I really wanted to get locked up, but $27 million a year for Tyler Linderbaum, I'm sorry, you got to let that go another direction. That's just the percentage of cap that you're going to allocate to that position. That's out of the world. That's out of the market for offensive center. That's not even resetting it. That's completely just like sending it to a different stratosphere. So again, I'm happy that we got the Owae. We made a splash. So all the reporters, they can say we were released right. The truth is we knew they were going to be in the edge market. I think it was very, very indicative looking at the combine and things like that the feel around the league is that the top 3 edge rushers aren't going to be available at 7. So if the top 3 edge rushers weren't going to be available at 7, you had to get one of these pass rushers. I think they got the guy that they typically look for. Height, weight, speed. And then can you coach that guy up and get the most out of him? Can you get that skill set out of him? Can you get all the toolboxes out of the toolbox and let him use them? And can it click here? Can it produce? I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see them prioritize getting the run defense shored up the middle. Keeping the linebackers clean is only going to make the run defense even better. Tim Settle is a long way to go in there. Deidrick Wise, bringing him back, is going to go a long way into that. Another guy who has versatility in a 4-3-3-4 front. It's Jordan McGee is going to be a pivotal piece moving forward for this team. Amik Robertson going into the slot, I think it locks you up, and Mikey Sammer still outside. I think there's still going to be some versatility there. Mikey Sammer still, it's these are guys that you've drafted, these guys that you're developing. It's time for these guys to step up. It's sink or swim for these guys, man. It's now. You've had the years, you've had good years, you have bad years. Now it's time for you to click as a pro and start to maximize and scratch the surface of your ceiling, that you had coming out of college. Because Mikey Sammerstill was a really, really good player at Michigan, and I think the best football is yet ahead of him. But again, I think Brandon Ayuk is probably a really, really good, I think that's a piece that's really, really going to be linked to here. I think he's going to put pen to paper with this team. That side, I didn't really want to go there. Are they going to do more at the wide receiver position? We'll see. And again, we'll see what day 2 has for us, man. We'll keep it in store. Like I said, I like Jaquan Brisker for this team. I think we're still going to be in the linebacker market. I think we're going to be in the cornerback market still. The Tyreek Woolen is still there. But signing, Amik Robertson, could that be a backup piece? I don't know. I think that's a lot of money to put into a backup, nickel cornerback. So I think that took you out of the Reek Woolen market. But again, you still got to have depth behind these players. Again, we'll see how this goes. But thank you from the Blue Chip Podcast. I really do appreciate you guys. Probably going to be potting all week for you guys for the takeaways and everything from each day of free agency while it's the big, first and second wave. That's pretty much going to be this week, and then you'll have a little bit of a die-off, and then you'll start to see more guys start to, take visits and things like that. I'll keep you posted on everything. Again, hopefully the Commanders make all the best signings for this team moving forward, and I'll be here to report them, good or bad or whatever they are. We're not going to know until the season anyway. So again, I thank you guys for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast. By fans, for fans, it's your host, Cody Potter. Have a blessed day and stay safe.